Hello everyone, my name's Ryan, coming to you again with another video for new members about sabers today. And I want to talk about a few pros and cons about sabers. What should you be looking for when you're getting a new saber, especially when it comes to TSL. Um, these are simply tips that I have that from my experience. It doesn't reflect for everyone, of course, but things that I think would be beneficial for someone new coming in to get what they're looking for a saber. I'm not going to go too much over price points or companies. I'll touch on that a little bit, but end of the day, that is up to the person who will be purchasing um, what fits into their budget. What I want to start off with is what a question we get asked a lot on the Saber Legion Facebook page is, what is a good saber? What's the best saber to get? Well, that's really subjective. What does best mean? Is that best for your budget? Best build quality? Um, Best features that you could possibly have on the saber? That's all subjective. If we start with the first one, we talk about budget. Um, what you'd be wanting to look for there is a stunt saber. Get yourself a good stunt saber. And if you're on a budget to begin with, you don't want to get a saber that has all these bells and whistles with it, because bells and whistles are just things that can go wrong. I remember the first combat saber I got was the Ultra Sabers Aeon V4, and I got it with the green LED and the emerald board, all these fancy features, and realized I spent way too much money on something that shouldn't have cost that much. And twice the LEDs went out. I had to constantly resolder. It started as a green one. The green LED went out, and because Ultra Sabers uses a quad LED, I unsoldered the green, soldered to the blue. Well, that went out. Then I unsoldered that, soldered to the red. Well, that went out, and all that was left is the white, and so that's what it is today. And I still use it. It's right here. This is my first dueling saber I've ever got. It's held down by the button's held down by uh, athletic tape, because Ultra Sabers just uses hot glue to hold their switches in place. But it's a good saber. What I was looking for is something that was a longer hilt and very smooth to hold. This is I do recommend this as a starting saber. It's something it's good in the hands. It's not an incredibly bulky saber. Some Ultra Sabers are massive. They're absolutely huge and not at all good for dueling. But something like this, it's good. There, the LED. I can push it and it slides, and you can tell not a lot of time was put into building this. So I recommend getting a stunt or an empty if you're comfortable with doing your own installs there. But things about stunts, they're simple. They got a light, a battery, and an on-off switch. No soundboards or speakers to possibly have issue with. SD cards can pop out, batteries can unhinge, but if you have a wired battery, that can save yourself quite a bit. This is a battery that's removable, and removable batteries have their pros and cons. I prefer them personally, but there's lots of pros to a in-hilt battery, one that you use a recharge port for. So something like that, nice saber to start off with. But what makes it a nice saber to start off with? Well, it's got a good length where you can two-hand it, you can one-hand it, and there's nothing really to catch on your hands with this. Where something like Graflex, incredibly uncomfortable. It's got all these greeblies on it, control box, grips, a cover tech wheel, bunny ears, buttons here, the eye. Gosh, that is not a comfortable saber to hold. It's bulky too. This version is a bit bulkier, but yeah, just not a comfortable saber to hold. And when you're fighting, you might be adjusting your hands a bit. You might want to hold it a certain way. Something like this is just not going to be really great for fighting with. Another thing be this. This is a Saber Forge Star Killer. It is a crystal chamber. Probably a big no-no to do a crystal chamber. There are some stronger variants out there, but problem with this crystal chamber, this is a weak point in the Saber, and this could just snap. You don't have any metal here. It's all open. It's thin metal around here. And then for this particular model, again, you still have all these issues with it not being a terribly comfortable saber to hold. Although this is a stunt. This is a stunt saber. See how it just turns on, turns off. There's nothing complex about it. So if you're on a budget, I really recommend getting a stunt saber, but get it something that's a little bit more smooth, you know, so you're not cutting up your hands or your gloves, because it can tear up your gloves a bit. I have a different pommel for this, and it just ripped up the palm on my lacrosse gloves. So something like that, something to think about. Slanted emitters is another thing I wanted to think about. This does have a bit of a slanted emitter. If you're planning to use a Suba, it's not going to cut the cheese very well for that. You want something that can be more flush to hit it, to make a Suba on there, because if you have a Suba above there, number one, you're throwing all that weight just that much more forward on your hilt. Number two, it can cause a spot that makes the blade a little bit more weak. You're putting a lot of extra strain on that gap there. If that Suba gets hit, it's torquing right at this point here, instead of being flush against that and letting that energy dissipate into the hilt itself. It's going to torque a bit on that, so something to keep in mind there. Well, there are a couple other things we can talk about. The length of a saber, that comes down to your personal preference. If you want to play the metagame, 16-inch hilts are what are allowed as of right now, early 2019, as a max length hilt. That way you can have the max length hilt and a max length blade, and you can get the max length possible. And TSL can sometimes be reach's life. So especially if you're a little bit shorter, you want to make sure you can get that range. Make it advantageous for you there. That being said, I know many fighters who can fight very well with a shorter blade. It all comes down to personal preference there. But again, try to look for something that's a little bit smoother to handle. Sabers, companies that you can look at are Ultra Sabers. Everyone knows about them. Saber Forge. Be careful with them sometimes, because they can be very sharp. They can cut up gloves, cut up hands. So get yourself something that's going to be a bit smoother for that. Vader's Vault, of course, and we'll show a couple of those here. Electrum Saber Crafts are really great. Crosspoint Sabers are built for what we do. I mean, that's what they do. And you can look at customs. You can look at from building your own from TCSS. You can use a Saber Forge ASP. So the sky's the limit for where you can get sabers from, but the majority of the sabers that we find in the Saber Legion are going to be Ultra Sabers, Saber Forge, Vader's Vault. You don't see too many Electrums out there, although a lot of us do have them. I personally don't fight with them because I think they're really shiny and I don't want to ding them up, but they are fully dual capable, and they're about the same diameter and feel as a Vader's Vault, which I really enjoy. But then you have like Genesis Custom Sabers. I know a couple of those have been floating around and been fought with. Crosspoint Sabers are definitely catching on. So over the years that I've been fighting in TSL, what I've found is a saber that is a thinner diameter with a Suba, and a little bit longer is my preferred saber. It's for two-handed style, but keeping that weight down is really important. So the saber that I always will recommend is the Vader's Vault Legionnaire. If you can afford one of these, get it. It's thin, very thin. Compare that next to the Ultra Saber here. You can see the difference in diameter between the two. It's pretty incredible. Here, I'll switch that up there. It's got a good length to it. It's got a great feel to it. Even this is tapered right here. There's nothing to catch my hands up on. It even has a 3.5-inch deep blade socket on here. I believe it's yeah, it's about that deep. Maybe not quite 3.5 inches, but it's a good deep blade socket on there, which is another point that I want to talk to you about. Blade socket depth. It will affect how much blade you can have. Your max right now, I believe, is 35 inches exposed. If you have a slanted emitter, the blade length starts at the shallowest point here, and then your hilt is measured to the length at the longest point. So if this would be the measure where my hilt length stops, this is where my blade length starts. So having a deep-seated blade, I personally believe that it helps with the control of your blade, and it helps throw the weight back a bit more. I have one saber that has a 9.5-inch deep blade socket, and what's so lovely about that, it just feels like you're holding the blade itself. If you just hold one of these blades and you swing it around, it feels so much more well balanced. So that's my opinion on that. Take it for what you will, but the more deep-seated your blade is, the more secure it is also in your saber. That being said, you don't want to get too deep, because then you have to start getting custom extrusion moldings for your blade to get them to, if you want to max out the length that you can have. Vader's vaults do not come as a stunt. They all come installed with the crystal shard soundboard. You can't get these empty. So those are pros and cons, however you think about that. But it's a beautiful saber. They do have removable batteries, which can turn on and off. I just recommend put a quick boot up sound font on there, nothing with a crazy long intro, so you can just snap them right back into the action there. Another saber I'll show you similar to it is the Brawler. I love this saber. It is heavier than the Legionnaire and it's a little bit shorter, but it holds up to its name. Only thing about them, it has a very short blade socket, and you can feel that when you're fighting. You can feel how the blade is a little bit more front heavy on it. But again, it is still a wonderful thing. And you'll notice all of my sabers that I fight with are all smooth. Nothing to get your hands caught up on. You want to be able to adjust your hands if you like, or however you grip your saber. You don't want anything getting in the way. That's incredibly important. You don't want that split second when you're fighting to have then felt like a greebly, and that takes your mind off the fight for just that split second, giving your opponent the advantage. Make it nice and simple. That's probably the biggest thing I can state in this video. Another thing is thin necks. Rule of thumb tends to be leaning towards thin necks are too weak to be fought with. I've seen them snap before. Some are claimed to be very strong for it. Some people have been fighting with them for a while and they haven't broken. But logically speaking, you have less metal in a more confined spot, more in the center there. So that's a torque point. It's a weak point in this whole saber build. Just take where we go. Thin necks can be a bit of an issue there. Look at your pommels. Do they have sharp edges on them? Do you have points and quillions on them? All that stuff might be not deemed allowed to be fought with. Any claws, sharp points on the saber, they're not allowed to be fought with because they can be dangerous. A lot of sabers do have removable parts for that, but make sure that those removable parts aren't actually holding together the saber. I know on the Ultra Sabers Renegade it has these spikes on them, which you can remove, but they also hold the crossguard in place, basically. So if you remove them, the saber then becomes a bit not very functional, if you want, and it wouldn't be safe to be used. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'd keep in mind when you're looking at your sabers. Get something simple as a startup saber. Even if you're not on a budget, having a saber that is going to be all reliable, that you can always fall back on, is great. Then you expand your collection. Maybe you get another stunt saber, or maybe you get one with sound next, and that's one you like to cosplay with. And you can find great looking sabers that are simple, but can also work in cosplay if you can only have one saber. I always recommend having two sabers. You never know what's going to happen. I've snapped in half, 2, 3, 4 sabers. I've snapped in half twice during a championship series event. 3 times, excuse me, in a championship series event. I've snapped a saber in half, and it's having a backup just right there, ready to go, is wonderful. It's something that you can practice with both. Just make sure that you have it ready to go. There's not much more I really want to say on it. Uh, if you guys have comments, questions, drop them below. I'll be posting this to Facebook too, so if you're on the Saber Legion page, check that out. Uh, yeah, that's about it. We don't have really any restrictions on Saber companies, as long as it's a solid hilt with that lights up. That's a big thing. Make sure it lights up. Falls within our rules and regulations, which you can find on the Saber Legion Facebook page under files. I think we're on rule set 4.0 right now. It might be 4.2, something like that. It has all the rules and restrictions on saber lengths. There's no saber length minimum, if that's something you've ever been concerned about. You can use curved hilts, so use anything like a cross guard or an extended hilt past that 16-inch length is considered an exotic saber, and that falls under a different category of sabers. So stay safe. Get yourself a good saber, someone that can be reliable. You guys happy dueling. Ryan out.